Welcome to Armor and Advocacy.
Welcome to Armor and Advocacy with Colin McNamee of McNamee Defense. Colin is an Ohio criminal defense attorney known for discreet, strategic representation in high-stakes criminal cases. His work focuses on protecting clients' rights, reputation, career, family, and future while avoiding unnecessary public exposure whenever possible. I'm Lisa Mosbey, and this conversation is about the early missteps that shape how a criminal case unfolds and why those first decisions matter. Colin, welcome back. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me back, Lisa. It's a great experience and wonderful to talk with you again.
So, Colin, let's jump right in. After someone is charged, what is often the first mistake you see that has an immediate impact on the case?
That's a very good question, Lisa, and thank you for asking. Most folks are well-intentioned and try to advocate for themselves. And one of the worst things that one can do after being accused or charged with a crime is to call the authorities and start asking questions. The cops and the prosecutors sort of expect this to happen, especially with certain types of persons who are accused of offenses. Family will call, friends will call, the defendant, him or herself, will try to call the prosecutor or the investigating detectives and ask questions. That's a trap. Those persons are not your friends in these circumstances. They will speak to you. They might advise you that you have a right to remain silent. But if you voluntarily phone them and you're not otherwise in custody and you're sitting at home on the telephone, not sitting in some interrogation room speaking with them, they're not likely to advise you of Miranda. And anything that you tell them in those conversations can and certainly will be used against you. And law enforcement is trained to use those conversations to improve the outcomes of their criminal prosecutions. The worst mistake one can make is trying to advocate for yourself. Instead, you should hire a very well-experienced criminal defense lawyer to advocate for you. And one of the first things that I would do here at McNamee Defense, if you were to be accused of or charged with a crime, is to reach out to law enforcement on your behalf. And me asking questions and offering some information on your behalf does not otherwise incriminate you. And I can learn a lot in a brief conversation with law enforcement about where their investigation is heading and how it may well unfold either before you've been charged or immediately thereafter. So please avoid that mistake. Call me, call another qualified criminal defense lawyer if I'm not in your state of Ohio, and do what you can to get that person's help immediately.
And I know you said it's a trap, and speaking directly with law enforcement, is a big risk. But can you dive a little deeper into what actually goes wrong in those conversations? How do we tell on ourselves?
People who, particularly those who are not well in tune with the criminal justice system, and that's all good people, right? We're trained to cooperate with authority figures. We're trained from a young age, as early as elementary school, to tell the truth, to offer up detail. And in those sorts of circumstances where we're accused of or charged with a crime, details and answering something truthfully to the extent that that might otherwise incriminate you or place you at the scene of a crime is extremely unhelpful. That's exactly the information law enforcement is looking for. And often that information is some of the key points on which a case turns, right? If law enforcement cannot place you at the scene of an alleged offense, then it's much more difficult for them to convict you. But if you somewhat innocently say, oh, well, I was in the area of the place where you're saying that hit and run accident occurred, yes, officer, then, unbeknownst to you, while giving an honest answer and trying to appear cooperative and genial, you may well have incriminated yourself. And again, law enforcement is trained to extract this information from us, and they're going to try very hard to present themselves as a friend, a confidant. They're going to work on you to try and earn a rapport, and then they're going to ask extremely damaging questions. And if someone has already sort of gone down the road of having a conversation, they're much more likely to continue to offer information that is utterly unhelpful to their case, Lisa. Folks often damage their position by trying to explain or justify what happened. And when those persons who have been accused of or charged with a crime do not understand the elements of an offense, the defenses that might be available to them under those circumstances, and they begin offering information without legal counsel, it's often potentially fatal, metaphorically speaking, to the outcome of their case.
And Colin, if we get past those conversations, the next step is, how do we get by some of the digital access that we have? How do text messages, emails, and social media posts end up being used against someone in a case?
So first and foremost, Lisa, we have to be very careful about what we post online. I know that we've all heard this. It's almost a proverb these days that whatever you post online sticks with you for the rest of your life, whether you delete it or not, right? Whether you delete your Facebook or your Instagram, that information remains on the internet forever. So first and foremost, please, all of you who are listening, come up with good habits, post responsibly. Don't post things that someone could construe in a negative way, regardless of what you're doing, but certainly don't post evidence of criminal conduct. What we also have to be very careful about, Lisa, is offenses like obstruction of justice or tampering with evidence. If we know, or reasonably should know, that a criminal investigation is underway or is about to commence against us, deleting social media posts, text messages, deleting photographs from our photo library, asking others to do the same, that may well be a felony offense that could get you in very serious trouble. And even if law enforcement and the prosecution are not able to prove the underlying offense, they can often prove offenses related to the destruction or deletion of evidence. So the first thing that you should do if you think you're going to be accused of a crime or charged with a crime is call me, and we can work through a strategy to best protect yourself. And unfortunately, whatever digital evidence might otherwise exist out there in the world, on your personal telephone, on social media, on someone else's Ring doorbell camera, it's already too late most of the time to do anything about that. We just have to come up with a strategy to mitigate the damage. Excellent question, Lisa.
Thank you. Once it's in the public domain, it's no longer ours. We think that it is, but it's no longer ours. Isn't that true?
Absolutely. Whatever we do in public, I guess to phrase it this way, Lisa, we have no reasonable expectation while we are in public. So that's why security cameras on light poles are completely legal, and they can photograph and record everything that happens within their field of view, because we have no right to privacy in public. And our neighbors can have cameras over their garage doors or in place of their doorbell, and they can record everything that passes by that camera. And there are networks of information. Nest and Google and Ring have procedures where they provide footage from cameras without the knowledge of the persons who have installed and operate those cameras to law enforcement. So we have to be very, very careful about that. What we do in public, we should always presume is being recorded and saved forever. And if you're going to protect yourself, you have to be cautious about that and be mindful of the fact that everything we do can be memorialized in that way.
And Colin, what happens when someone waits too long to involve a defense attorney?
Sometimes, the strategies that I might otherwise employ in the immediate aftermath of an accusation or a charge, Lisa, the ability to employ those strategies evaporates with the passage of time. So if a person accused of or charged with a crime waits too long to contact my office, strategies, tactics, devices, conversations, all the things that we could have done in the early days of a criminal case, a lot of that goes out the proverbial window, and we have no ability thereafter, or a limited ability anyway, to protect the client. So the very first thing you should do, if you even have an inkling that you're going to be charged with a crime, is to call my office Ask to speak with me. I will talk with you personally on the telephone or schedule a meeting with you to talk to you about your specific case and how we can best form a defense strategy in the immediate aftermath of a charge to protect your future, your rights, your livelihood, and your family.
And what kinds of actions make it harder to control how the case is handled moving forward?
Essentially what we've already talked about. The excellent questions that you've already asked illuminate a lot of the behaviors that clients engage in that do not help their case. So you should not call law enforcement on your own. You should not have your family or friends call law enforcement. You should not provide law enforcement with your telephone or a passcode to your telephone. If they're going to take something from you, make them get a warrant. If they're going to take possession of your telephone and wait for a warrant to get a passcode or try to crack into your phone, there's nothing that you can do about that. But you can certainly avoid voluntarily providing them that device. And in the meantime, we can hopefully work on strategies to quash a potential warrant or request for the information that is held on that device. Going back to the scene of a crime or an accident, doing anything that otherwise implicates your knowledge that something happened or something illegal happened is very unhelpful. So again, call a qualified criminal defense lawyer and do what you can to get out in front of those accusations as quickly as possible.
Let's tie this all together for our listeners, Colin. Can you walk through an example where an early mistake changed the direction of a case?
A recent example would be, and this is a good question, Lisa, where a client was accused of a hit and run accident that very unfortunately resulted in a fatality. A person passed away. And this particular individual who was dealing with the accusation cooperated with law enforcement, prior to calling an attorney, answered questions, offered up the motor vehicle, offered up a telephone, answered questions with regard to, where this person was, when they were there, what they were doing, which helped law enforcement establish a timeline which could potentially lead to a charge. And we're hoping to avoid a charge, but exactly what we've talked about, trying to help yourself is instinctually correct, but is not what we should be trying to do to help ourselves in the context of a criminal defense case. We should be calling a qualified lawyer to help us immediately, to stop us from making mistakes that are going to make the case easier to prove, and especially if one is innocent and the government's going to have a hard time developing any credible evidence to prove otherwise. Don't give them anything for free. Don't talk to them. Don't engage in meetings or conversations with them. Just call a lawyer and let the lawyer do all the work.
Colin, I think what you're saying sounds easy, but I don't know if it's easy in practice. What does it look like when someone handles those first stages in a way that protects their position? How does someone not speak at those times when they're being asked questions, or how would they respond?
We should always be pleasant, cordial, and somewhat cooperative in those circumstances with law enforcement, Lisa. And that's a very good question. We cannot refuse to answer questions about our name, date of birth, address, any biographical information. Law enforcement's entitled to know that. So you want to cooperate and tell them who you are, tell them your birth date, your social security number, where you live, that sort of thing. But anything beyond biographical information, resist the urge to help yourself. They're going to ask you easy biographical questions about where you live and what your neighborhood's like and what family lives in the house with you. And then they're immediately going to turn to their law enforcement training and segue into questions, the answers to which could be very incriminating. So you want to be pleasant and cooperative. If you're going to be arrested, you're going to be arrested. And there's nothing that anybody can do about that. You ought to just cooperate with them. Go peacefully. Don't say anything. Just, hello, my name is X. I live here. I was born on this date in this year, and my lawyer's name is Colin McNamee. And that's pretty much all you have to say. Any other question that they might ask you is protected by your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. If the answer to any question might tend to incriminate you, that answer is protected, and you can invoke the Fifth Amendment, refuse to answer cordially, and say that you would respectfully like to be put in contact with your lawyer, and that you're not going to answer any further questions about anything unless and until your lawyer is present.
Very good. And that's a great explanation. I think we'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much for walking us through this process and helping to clear it up.
You're welcome, Lisa, and thank you for having me. It's a pleasure as always.
That's it for today's episode of Armor and Advocacy. If you've been charged with a crime or believe you may be under investigation in Ohio, the steps you take early can have a lasting impact on how your case is handled and resolved. To learn more or schedule a confidential consultation, visit McNameeDefense.com or call 614-957-7629. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.